So, let's talk about something that's, well, a huge puzzle in today's workplace. It's this weird paradox where people seem more engaged and dedicated than ever, but at the same time, they're completely burned out. How is that even possible? Let's dig in.
Okay, so first look at this number, a whopping 92%. According to a recent survey, that's how many employees say they are fully committed to their jobs. I mean, that sounds amazing for any company, right? Engagement is through the roof.
But then you see this, 79%. That's how many of those same people also say they're feeling totally burned out, overworked, undervalued, and just stretched to the absolute limit. It's the overlap here that's so baffling.
And that, right there, that's the big question we're trying to figure out today. How can you be all in on your job and at the exact same time be completely exhausted by it? Let's try to unpack this.
You know, this isn't just some passing phase. It's a massive contradiction that really seems to define what it's like to work today. And it's not about people not trying hard enough. Oh no, there's a much deeper story going on here.
In fact, the research firm Gallup actually gave this a name. They call it the Great Detachment. It's this idea of a workforce that's still showing up, still doing the job, but they've psychologically checked out. They're disconnected from their companies even while they're going through the motions.
And get this, these numbers really paint a picture of what that detachment looks like. So you've got 92% of people who say they're committed, but a massive 72% are also planning to look for a new job in the next year. They're doing the work, but they've got one foot out the door, always on the lookout for something better.
So what's driving all this? Well, it's pretty clear. It's an absolute epidemic of burnout. And we're not just talking about feeling a little tired after a long week. We're talking about a serious state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion, all caused by way too much stress for way too long. And it's hitting the entire workforce.
And if you look at this chart, you'll see that, yeah, burnout is hitting everybody, but it's hitting the younger generations the hardest. I mean, look at this. A staggering 87% of Gen Z and 85% of millennials are reporting they feel burned out. That's just wild.
And it's so important to remember that behind every single one of these statistics is a real person. Burnout isn't just a number on a chart. It takes your performance, sure, but it also takes a huge toll on your personal well-being. It's a deeply human problem. And this stuff, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It has this ripple effect. In fact, nearly half of employees say that the number one threat to a good company culture is their stressed-out colleagues. It's like one person's burnout can start to poison the whole environment for everyone. Okay, so to really grasp how serious this can get, let's look at a really high-stakes example. Doctors. In the medical field, burnout isn't just about having a bad day at the office. It can literally have life or death consequences. Get this, research shows that in the US, more than half, over 50% of all physicians are dealing with occupational burnout. Think about that for a second. More than half of the people we trust with our health are suffering from this.
And here's where it gets really serious. A major study from the Mayo Clinic found that doctors dealing with burnout were more than twice as likely to self-report a medical error. Just let that sink in. The connection is direct and it is terrifying.
So why is this happening? Well, the causes are baked right into the system. For every single hour they get to spend with a patient, they're spending 2 hours on paperwork and admin. They're working an average of 51 hours a week, and they're constantly battling clunky, stressful electronic health record systems. It's a recipe for disaster.
Now, the situation with doctors is obviously an extreme example, but the things causing their burnout, they're really just amped up versions of what's exhausting everybody else, everywhere. The pressures are basically universal, even if the stakes look a little different in other jobs.
This table here really breaks down some of the biggest culprits. First, people just can't switch off. Remote workers, for example, are putting in an average of 3 extra hours every single day. Then you've got this insane administrative overload. Over a third of workers say it's the main reason they can't get things done. And finally, there's this huge disconnect with managers. Half of all managers think they're giving feedback every week, but only 20% of their employees agree. Oof.
And this picture, I mean, this says it all, right? The line between work life and home life has pretty much disappeared for so many of us. We're stuck in this always-on culture, and it's almost impossible to actually get the rest we need to recharge.
Okay, so that's the problem. It's a big one. So what's the solution? How do we break this cycle of the engaged but totally exhausted worker? Well, the good news is, a path forward is actually starting to take shape.
So there are basically two ways people try to tackle this. On one hand, you have the individual approach. This is all about fixing the person, with things like wellness apps or coaching. But on the other hand, you've got the organizational approach, which focuses on fixing the system itself. And it turns out the organizational strategies, the ones that address the root causes, are way, way more effective.
And what's really interesting is that when you actually ask employees what they want, they're not asking for a yoga app. They're asking for real systemic change. 62% want real resources to help them manage burnout. 48% are asking for more flexibility. And 43% just want clear rules about not having to respond to emails and messages after hours.
At the end of the day, it's clear that flexibility isn't just some nice little perk anymore. It's a core requirement for a modern, sustainable work-life balance, one that lets passionate, committed people do great work without completely burning themselves out.
And that really brings us to a final question, something for you to think about. Fixing this whole big system, it really starts with small, intentional changes. So what's one thing, one tiny policy change, one new rule, one different way of doing things that could make your own workplace just a little bit healthier?